Do you ever get the feeling you'd wish you'd never started a job? I've got the back door blues. Hi, I'm Chris and welcome to the Handyman at Home channel. So I get a WhatsApp message from my daughter saying that her back door is proving very difficult to open and close. A couple of days later, having thrown a few tools into the car boot, I'm off to see if I can sort it out, thinking it's probably just swelled a bit with all the rain we've been having and likely only needs a little bit planing off. If only I'd known what I was letting myself in for. Once I'm there and get a chance to take a closer look, I can see there's a lot of wood scrapings along the lower edge of the door as a result of the bottom rail having dropped a bit on one side. And when I try opening it, I can feel it binding quite badly against the aluminium storm guard threshold. It looks like the rail has swelled and dropped due to rain getting in. Looking along the outside face of the bottom rail, it also looks like it's been butchered at some point in the past when the original weather bar was removed, probably when the door was trimmed to size when fitting the storm guard. Whoever did it has slapped on what looks like some primer to finish the job off properly, of course. Overall, the door looks like it's only ever been painted with a single coat of primer or undercoat, so it's also going to need rubbing down and then painting with a decent undercoat and external quality paint. But that'll have to wait for another day. I first need to fix the immediate issue. Got the door supported on a couple of blocks of wood and my trusty windbag, so now we can start undoing the screws. With the door off, we get a much better view of what's happening. See traces of water down the front edge, but down here we can clearly see the door. I can't remember, is it the stile? Has dropped maybe a couple of millimeters, quarter of an inch, something like that, and that's why it's binding. So I guess the first thing is we'll see whether we can knock it back up. For anybody of a nervous disposition, look away now. It's a lot worse than I thought. So all of that section of the door is just rotted away. It's just like cardboard. So as soon as I tapped it with a hammer, or a mallet rather, it just crumbled. So the only thing I can think of, the only timber I've got with me is one of my trusty support blocks, but I think maybe if I can trim it to fit, I can get that in there, bond it in, maybe. Won't be anywhere near what I was hoping, but unless I rush off to a timber store, which means putting the door back on, etc, etc, I haven't really got much option. So unfortunately, by the time I've hacked out the majority of the rot, my one and only piece of wood is now too small. So it's a case of door back on, off to B&Q, found some 44mm square. It's only soft pine, but it'll have to do. And so I'm going to see if I can rebate it in. So mitre there and a mitre here, and hopefully we can get it something like that. We'll rebuild the majority of the missing timber, but not ideal. But limited tools, limited time, and of course there's always going to be a rusty screw just where you're trying to cut the mitre. Whilst I was able to cut the upper mitre pretty much on the line, that rusty screw really messed up the lower mitre. Although it feels dry to the touch, some of the timber is still a bit soft, so I'll try soaking some wet rot hardener in before fitting the new repair piece. A quick trial fit shows a reasonable match at the top, but it's nowhere near as good as I would have liked at the bottom. I'll have to try and squeeze as much sticks-like in the gap and then finish it off with some 2-part wood filler. The aim is just to get a few more years out of the door so it doesn't have to be perfect, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. Okay, time to slosh some of that wet rot hardener around. It's probably not going to make a huge difference, but it certainly won't do any harm. I also tried to get some down the joint between the rail and the stile. I pre-drilled a couple of pilot holes in the new repair piece and partially screwed in a couple of decent sized gold screws. Then it's a case of liberally applying as much stick light as I can to try and bond the new timber to the old, filling the gaps around that wobbly mitre cut. Once it's fitted and lined up as best as I can, it's then just a case of screwing it in. They used to say splash it all over in the old Brute 33 ad. Well, here it's a case of squeeze it all in. It's by no means a work of art, but by the time I've finished it doesn't look too bad. Hopefully there won't be too much shrinkage as it dries, and any remaining gaps can be filled before painting. While the adhesive sets, I'm going to fit a couple of these repair plates, one at each end of the internal face of the bottom rail, to try and secure it to the stile at each edge of the door. Yes, I know they look terrible, but they were the only things I could see in B&Q that might do the job. Once the door's had a couple of coats of paint, they'll hopefully blend in a bit and won't be that noticeable. It's only a back door after all. At this point, the heavens opened, and it was a mad rush to get all my tools inside and the door back on. Oh, the joy! Back again to hopefully finish it off. In the meantime, I've made up a new weather bar from some timber left over from a previous project. My thinking was that something like this would also help strengthen the joints between the bottom rail and the stiles. I know it doesn't have a drip groove cut into it, but it should stop most of the rain running down the face of the door with any luck. And it didn't cost me, or more importantly the daughter, anything. So I've got it clamped in position. I'm going to drill some pilot holes. Then I'll take it back off and put some adhesive behind it before I screw it on permanently. Right, I'm going to see if I can get some sealant in here. Down that join. smooth it out in a minute. Okay, I've given it a good sand to get rid of all of the loose, flaking primer paint, whatever it was. Filled in some of the gaps with more adhesive. I know it's a bit bodgy, but there you go. Drilled a series of pilot holes. Put some adhesive on the back of my homemade rain deflector and a thin bead of weatherproof sealant along the upper edge and down the two sides. The idea being to try and stop any ingress of water down the back of the rain deflector. Not going to do any harm. Okay, let's get that fitted. And then we should be hopefully on the home straight. Okay, well, all fixed on. Doesn't look too bad. It's at this point I start to get the feeling I must have upset someone in a previous life. Not only has it started to rain again, but I've realised I should have trimmed up the bottom edge from the other side of the door to avoid having to work around the joining plates. However, as I've already fitted the weather bar, this stops me from positioning my track saw correctly. Never mind, some carefully positioned pieces of scrap hardboard should allow me to get the track lying flat and level. But there's not a lot of working space, is there? After a fair bit of swearing and wet knees, I eventually managed to get the bottom edge trimmed up, and we're almost ready to get the door back on its hinges. And the rain stopped. Things are looking up. One last job before rehanging the door is to fill those screw holes with some 2-part filler. I was probably a little bit heavy-handed with the filler though. Having sanded back the filler and got the door back on its hinges, I could finally get a coat of primer undercoat on, which will do for now. We're on the home straight now, with some more 2-part filler liberally applied to fill in any remaining gaps. It's not going to win any beauty prizes, but once it's sanded down and some paint slapped on, it should hopefully give us a few more years' service. And at last, we're finally done, at least for the time being. The door opens and closes without any difficulty, and the homebrew weather bar should hopefully keep most of the rain from running back under the bottom edge of the door. I can always fix a small rubber strip onto it to create a drip groove if I need to. The next step, as I've already said, is to rub down the door and frame completely, inside and out, and get some decent coats of paint on them to prevent further deterioration. Just need a couple of dry days. I'll probably also run some beads of weatherproof sealant along the bottom edge of each inset panel to try to prevent any water from getting down behind the rails, which is where I think the rot began. So what started out as a quick job to plane a little bit off the bottom of the door to stop it binding turned into a full-scale repair spread over 2 days in between bouts of rain. But such is life. Anyway, hope you found it of some interest. Please do like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Cheers, and I hope to see you again on the next one.